Okay, this is Daz 4.9. This is an answer to a request on the iClone or Real Illusion forum about how to get the Stonemasons Warehouse asset out into iClone. Fundamentally, the first thing is obviously if you have Daz Studio and you've got the latest version, you may well find that all your stuff is under content here. And if it's not downloaded like this, it'll be grey. If it is downloaded, it'll be green or whatever. And depending on what you've got will depend on what you've got here. So your most recent asset that you purchased might just be in smart content. I've got a lot of very old content in the system, and the Stonemasons Warehouse is actually quite an old asset. So I have to find that particular asset a different way. And you can do that over here on the right hand panel. So as you can see, I'm in actors, wardrobes and props. And you've got scene, and you've got parameters, and you've got content library. And the easiest way to check for something in the content library is just to type it in. So I'm just going to come up here, and now I know it's called warehouse, so that helps me. So warehouse, I'm simply going to type that in and hit return, and it's going to go tunneling through my entire system looking for in all the directories on my computer where all my content is, and sure enough, it's found something called warehouse. There it is. So just double click, bring that in. You may be able to bring it in through the the smart content over here. Doesn't really matter. The main thing is just get it in. So here it is. It's in the interface. Now, the interesting thing about this is when you come up here to the file menu to export something, you really need to make sure that you have something selected before you do this, because if you do not, then you'll probably you'll either get an error. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to just put this on my desktop, and I'm going to call it warehouse, and you get the this dialog here, and it'll actually tell you this dialog what it's actually going to export, and if it says yes, then it is going to export it. If it doesn't say anything here in the export column, like it says none or no, I can't remember what it is, then it's not going to come out. It's not going to turn up in your FBX file. So if you want to be absolutely certain that it's going to work, the thing to do is to make sure the object's selected in the scene manager. So if I switch to the scene manager, sorry, I clicked it, it goes away when you click it. Notice that I have ground 1, and the way this model has been built is that it is literally a hierarchy of which the ground is the basis, and we can see the hierarchy by opening it up here. Okay, so here are all the objects in the thing, and if you want to see the whole scene, of course, you can just frame it. And of course, it frames weirdly because we have a sky dome, so keep that in mind. If I want to sort of frame it on something else, like one of the buildings, let's have a look. I can select something here like building south and frame on that. Well, not exactly. As you can see, it's not quite like iClone where it'll just tunnel in. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Fundamentally, if you want the whole model out, you just need to select it up here at the root level. So this model, as I said, just has this thing called SI ground. Everything else is underneath it. So make sure it's selected here in the scene manager, or the scene tab, and highlight it in yellow, and then come over here to File, and then choose Export. Choose the format, but as I said, FBX, and then give it a name. So we'll do warehouse again. Okay, and I'm sort of putting it on my desktop for ease. We'll get the export dialog. Now yours will look a bit different here, and it'll probably have a lot of this stuff on the left hand side ticked. Well, the thing to do here is think about this. This is a piece of it's actually not a piece of geometry. It's obviously a series of pieces of geometry, which typically, if it's not a character inside Daz, is referred to as a prop, which is why I've got props ticked here. But you'll notice that I've unticked figures. There's things like not hidden or no hidden, which basically means that it'll not output anything that's been hidden by you over here. So if you come over here, expand it and hide a few things, you can just make sure those don't go out. You can also export selected, so you can quite happily come over here, expand the scene manager, select a few of those sub-objects there, and only those will come out if that's what you wish to do. But notice I've turned off animations, cameras, lights and morphs, and the whole reason is the rhyming. This is just a piece, this is just geometry, so anyway. So the next thing to do is notice what's going on down here. It says export, and here is everything in the scene that's going to get exported. And that list you're seeing here is exactly the same list you saw over here when I expanded it, okay? So that's exactly the same list. It's telling you how much is in it, how many polygons and stuff, and the name that it's called. Then over here on the right you have output options, okay? Now there are some limits with iClone. As you can see, I've left it on 2012 binary. I'm pretty sure now that the latest version of 3D Exchange supports 2014, if I remember right. So let's switch it to that. If it doesn't work, we'll come back. I've got embed textures. This sometimes confuses you, because even when you have embed textures selected, which you might assume, like in iClone, it will put them inside the actual FBX file, which is what it's supposed to do, and store them. It actually doesn't, which you'll see. Sometimes when you export this with embed textures on, there will still be a folder turning up on your desktop with all the textures inside, so just keep that in mind. But if you want to force a folder for all the textures, you can do that here by saying collect textures to folder, and it will absolutely put them into a folder outside of Daz where you can find everything related to this particular object. Okay, so you can see, just look at the parameters I've got here. You can see I've turned everything off as far as these are concerned. So I've left these on. These don't really make any difference, by the way, because this one's all to do with skinning characters, and we're not doing any characters. So just follow the ticks I've got here. Say accept. You'll get the Daz export dialog. It'll go through its little paces, and once it's done, it's actually exported now. So let's minimize. You can see that we have Warehouse FBX here. In this case, with this latest version of FBX, it's not put a folder with textures in. It's literally just put an FBX there. So it looks like they've improved that. Let's bring up 3D Exchange. Let's go open. Here it is. Let's click open, make sure this has worked. Now, it may have import animation on, but you don't want animation because there isn't any. It's just a model, so turn all that off. Make sure that adjust material color automatically is not turned on. That's more to do with Maya, so just make sure that's off. Now, this will take some time to load in. This is a big asset, you know. So I'm actually going to pause this video so you don't have to watch the pain and come back when it's done. Okay, so it's finally turned up and it is in. So first few things to make a point of here before we get into detail. You can see the sky domes come in too, because there was a sky dome inside of Daz. If you have been watching my camera tutorials in the F103 Animate series, you'll notice there is no sky dome. I was using stuff inside of iClone. I got rid of the sky dome, and I'm going to show you how to do that, because if you don't know how to do that, it's a useful thing to learn. The other thing you'll notice up here is it says root. Now, this is always the case when you have something that comes in where where 3DX can't figure out what it is at the root level. It will just call it root node, and that's the fundamental root of the entire object. You can see here, if I collapse it, there's this thing called root node, and everything else is underneath it. You can actually rename this, so if you don't know you can, and you can do it in two ways. Sometimes F2, classic Windows rename keyboard shortcut works, function 2, but if it doesn't work like that, then you can actually just double click. So just double click and type warehouse. And the reason you might want to do this if you don't do it normally and aren't used to it is that whatever name you see here is the name that turns up inside of iClone in the scene manager. That name is separate to the name of the asset saved to disk as an iProp, because this is going to become an iProp. But if you don't name this, all you'll see inside of iClone in the scene manager is something called root node. Bit of a pain if you have lots of different objects and every single one is called root node, because you won't know which one's which. So name that up here at the top level. Okay, so now we've done that, we need to do two things. The first one we want to do is I'm going to get rid of the sky dome. Now I'm not going to get rid of it because you can't delete anything inside of 3DX. That's not a sort of something that you can do. But I'm going to double click on it to highlight it. You can see it jumps all the way down here and it's called SI Sky. And I can actually hide it. But the thing to remember is when you do this that there's a number of ways when you export to whether something turns up in iClone. So if I select these two elements here, right, and well, actually, I'm not going to select them. I'm going to untick them. See this untick? And they're going to hide. And then what I'm going to do is, now that they're hidden by turning off the ticks, I'm going to say hide excluded, and they actually disappear from this list. Now they're not gone, they're still there, and you can bring them back by saying, you know, show all. But what's good about this is if you export now, and you come up here and you say export to iClone, then even when it's set to all, you will not get those two items. So that's very useful to know. You can also do it by export visibility visible only or selected only. But the way I've just shown you is a good way if you're working and you just want to hide things as you go, and then when you're done, you can just come here and go export all, and those two items will actually not go out into iClone. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's home in a bit more. Now that we've hidden the sky dome, the home won't work because of the way it was such a big model. This thing is huge, by the way. So I'm just going to push in a bit. Now, if pushing in even with the shift key doesn't work, the shift key held down when you zoom is just like an iClone. It's an accelerator, but this is such a big model, not having much effect. I tend to jump in as per the tutorial, so we can simply come here and find something like building cell shape and go home, and now we've jumped in on this group of buildings here. So there we go, all's good, except I'm now going to show you an issue that you need to be aware of with models. If you're a seasoned 3D person, you can probably see this already and see what's going on, and you'll go, oh, okay, and something's not right. But if you're not used to it, then you know, I'm going to show you. You can actually see it quite clearly on this fence here and on this building. See this building, this wall goes into shadow. It looks like it's going to shadow. It's actually not. There's something wrong with the shading. So I've just double clicked on it. You can see it's jumped to this one called building 2. So that is that building, and I'm going to home again. So let's just go straight in. Now I'm just orbiting with Alt right mouse button to do this, and Alt left mouse button. Right, see that weird shading? You may think, well, there's nothing wrong with that. Actually, there's something seriously wrong. This is actually to do with normals and smoothing groups, and it can be fixed. And that's the reason up here, if we come to the modify section and click on it, you'll see that there's a section here called normal. You can jump to it with the O key. So there we go. So now we're in this section called normal, and you have these things called flip face, auto smooth, unified, And now I can't go into all of these, but I'll show you the one that is going to fix this problem. The thing to remember is that to make this work, you have to have a mesh selected, and the meshes are, of course, the little ball with the hash lines on. Those are telling you that's an actual mesh. Anything that isn't that, like this one here, is a node, like a null object or a node, like in Maya or Modo or 3ds Max or Blender or whatever. You know, null, what they call them, all sorts of different things. Anyway, I've got this object selected, as you can see, and I'm just going to run auto smooth on it with the default 45. And now look what's happened. You may think, oh, it's made the wall worse, but it hasn't. It's fixed it because the lighting's coming from the other side, which is what it's supposed to be doing. And we now got this really nice proper shading. And look at this wall here, it's got the same problem. So I'm just going to click on that. It's called Buildings West. And I'm just going to go auto smooth. Bosh, that's now fixed. You have to do this for all the geometry if you can see it in your scene, because this will go into iClone, it'll not render properly, and it'll look awful. And you can see it on the fence down here too. Now, you may say, oh God, this is going to be really laborious, I've got to do this to every single one. Well, the answer is you don't have to, because what you can do is you can just select them all. So I'm going to select the first one up here, the first mesh item in the list on the left, hold down the control key, standard Windows thing, so select, 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 select. I'm just selecting all of the meshes, and once I've got them all selected, I can globally run this fix. So let's just get them all selected. Let's scroll down. Oops, missed. Hold down the control key again, and again. I'm just going down the whole list of all the meshes. Get to the bottom. There we go. Last two. Right, brilliant. Everything's now selected here that is a mesh, the whole shebang. So I can now go auto smooth, and it'll take a while, but it's going to do the whole lot. They're now done. The entire model is now fixed. So that's cool. So let's just jump out. There we go. The model now looks really nice. All the normals and smoothings fixed, and that's what we want to get out. So right now, if I put this out, I get one big model. So let's just do that. So iClone. It's called Warehouse. I'm just going to call this Warehouse All. You'll see why in a moment. You can change the name, whatever you want here. Embed textures, yes. Scale them to 1024. If they're bigger than that, yes. Although, to be honest, most of the textures in this scene, I think, are 1024 anyway. The original Daz ones. Okay, and I'm going to actually put it into my default iClone folder. That means it's going to go into props. So let's just do that. Okay, done. Let's go to iClone. iClone. It's going to be turning up in iClone. Sorry about that Bing. That's just email or something. Okay, props, of course. Custom props. Prop. And excuse all the other stuff I normally deal with. Warehouse All. Here it is. It's just come in. So let's put it in. There we go, it's in. So the only thing I'd say now, and of course if you remember my training, if we home, it all disappears. It disappears because the preview camera is so big that the clipping planes don't work. So watch the video. There we go. So the thing to note though is there's only one object here. It's called Warehouse. There is no sub-objects like in my tutorials. You have to make them inside 3D Exchange, and I'm hoping you know how to make the sub-props. If you don't, then please come back in the forum and let me know. I'll just give you a quick demonstration. I want the building 1 to say, well actually I'm going to bring all the buildings out. So let's say I want buildings east. That's that block here, and you can always check if, let's home on it, you can always check if you've got the right thing. If you're not sure when you double click you've got the right thing, just untick it and see if it's what you expect. Right, just, yeah, and then it tells you exactly what you got. Okay, so I've selected that item. Say I want this item inside of iClone to show up as a completely separate object, and I can do this to any level. You know, I've done it in the tutorials on the roof of the building. So this is building 1 over here, and I've isolated the roof as a sub prop and all this. So let's go right to the top node, which is where make sub prop is, and you can see it right there. And the trick with subprops is you need to know where to make them. Now the thing to know here is the mesh is actually the shape. That's the actual mesh. But you'll notice that most of these have like a node above it, and this is something that's, as I said, this is kind of the node that looks after the mesh. So it's typical to see 2 items like this. And you can make a subprop at either level. You can do it on the mesh, or you can do it at the level above. Depending on how you want to organize things. So for example, I want this roof to be isolated. I can say make subprop at that level, and notice now that I have a subprop node here, and if I click on the hide button, notice how the roof hides. Well, that is what's going to turn up inside of iClone now. That one subprop I've made is now isolated that roof. So you just need to go find the things you want to isolate. So we talked about this group of buildings over here, and I'm just going to select them at this level. I'm going to go make subprop, and now you'll see that I have a subprop for those, and I can hide those. And if I now export the whole thing again to iClone, and make sure you have something selected in this tree to export, otherwise it gets a bit fussy. So warehouse temp, because I've just made some temp changes. Oh, sorry, lousy. So temp. Okay, so there we go. So export geometry warehouse temp. Oh, well, same as before. Out it goes, and bang, and then back to iClone. And let's go and delete this one, and go back to my content manager. And there's the new one. Let's bring that in. And now, if we go to the scene manager, you'll see we have more than one item. In fact, we have a hierarchy. Open it up. There's the roof that I isolated, and there's the east buildings. So let's select the roof and home. So there's the roof. So now I can hide it. It's part. So that's how I do it in the tutorials, to get it out of the way when I dive in and see what's going on. And then here's some buildings. So there we are. So you just need to decide inside of 3DX how much breakdown you want. I broke out the garage doors so they could slide up and down, because obviously when you make a subprop like this, you can actually choose, as you know, where the pivot is, which is really, really important. So here's P for pivot. and you can actually edit the pivot and decide where the center of the object is. All these objects, of course, are centered around world 0 because of the way they've been built and come out of Daz. But if you need to move the pivot, you can do that. And if you want to animate, say, the doors on the building over here, so for example, we home in on this, and I go, okay, that I would really like to animate the garage door, then you just need to find it in the list here. So there I've selected, notice that, so garage door B, let's home on that. There it is. I've got the actual asset selected, so let's select it. Let's jump right to the top. Let's go make subprop. So now I've made a subprop for this door, but I can't animate it. It's going to be a pain because the node is at world 0. You know, the pivot point is kind of at world 0. So let's go edit pivot on it and see where. I'm going to type P this time for speed. There we go. Edit pivot. There it is. So the actual node around which it's going to rotate and move is right over here where world 0 is. I don't want that, so I'm going to do a quick thing. I'm going to set it to the center first. So that puts it right into the middle of the door. It's a quickie. You can do this manually, by the way. You can just literally grab this and set it. You can say bottom center, and that's good. I quite like that bottom center because that's going to put it at the bottom of the selected item, and that's kind of a good thing for a door that you want to slide. So if I now come out of edit pivot mode, you can do it, come out here, or you can do what I did over here and just close the dialog that was the top left. Now I have this object, and I can test it because I happen to have the move tool selected, and here's the rotate tool. You wouldn't do this with a door, of course, but you can see what's going on. But I've now got my pivot point in the right place for me to animate this. So if I now export this model back out to Q to drop the tool, if I now export this one to iClone, and let's call this Warehouse Temp 2, so original, sorry, I will now have access to the garage door. So there we go. So let's go to the scene manager, select the warehouse at the root level, delete it, go to the content manager, scroll down, here's temp 2, get that in. And go to scene manager, open it up, select the garage door, home on that, just to get straight into it. And there it is. And now what you'll find if I hold down shift and just go to zoom tool and hold down shift and pull out a bit, just rotating around a bit, we can now animate it. So it's selected in the scene manager, so I can simply come up here to the move tool. And now I have my garage door that I can animate like anything else in iClone. So there you go. I hope that helps. Sorry if it's been a real quickie and flash, but hopefully that makes sense, and if not, drop back on the forum and let me know. Take care. Bye.